On a bright Saturday afternoon, the quiet suburban neighborhood gathered for its annual community barbecue in a large backyard filled with picnic tables covered in blue and white checkered tablecloths, children playing on the grass, and neighbors chatting beneath tall green trees. Ethan Carter, a humble single father, attended the event with his 14-year-old daughter, Emma. Dressed in a simple charcoal gray t-shirt and jeans, Ethan preferred staying away from attention, spending most of his time helping neighbors carry heavy coolers, serving food, and making sure his daughter was enjoying herself. Most people knew him only as a construction worker who had moved into the neighborhood a few years earlier after losing his wife. Few realized that before becoming a father, Ethan had spent over a decade serving as a highly decorated Navy SEAL, completing dangerous missions around the world before leaving the military to raise his daughter in peace. Across the yard lived the neighborhood's wealthiest family. Richard Harrison, a successful businessman, loved showing off his luxurious lifestyle and often boasted about his 23-year-old son, Tyler, who had recently earned a black belt in martial arts after winning several regional tournaments. Tyler enjoyed the attention almost as much as his father and believed no one in the neighborhood could match his fighting skills. As guests gathered around the barbecue, Tyler noticed Emma accidentally bump into one of the expensive outdoor speakers while trying to avoid a running child. Although nothing was damaged, Tyler immediately began yelling at the frightened teenager, accusing her of being careless and embarrassing her in front of everyone. Emma stepped back, tears forming in her eyes, while Ethan calmly walked over and placed himself between his daughter and the angry young man. Speaking quietly, Ethan apologized for the misunderstanding and assured Tyler that if anything had been damaged, he would gladly pay for it. Instead of calming down, Tyler laughed loudly and mocked Ethan for always acting soft. He stepped closer, pointed a finger directly into Ethan's chest, and sneered, "You're too gutless to even defend your own daughter." The surrounding crowd fell silent. Some guests pulled out their phones, sensing that something dramatic was about to happen. Tyler smirked confidently, convinced the quiet single dad would simply walk away like always, what neither Tyler nor anyone else at the barbecue knew was that the calm man standing in front of him had survived some of the world's most dangerous combat missions, and staying calm under pressure was exactly what he had been trained to do for years. Tyler's smirk grew wider as the crowd gathered around the confrontation. "What's the matter?" he taunted. "I thought fathers were supposed to protect their kids. Or are you too scared?" Emma clung to Ethan's arm, whispering, "Dad, let's just go." Ethan gently patted her hand and replied calmly, "Everything's going to be all right." His voice was steady, without a trace of anger. That calmness only irritated Tyler even more. Believing Ethan was afraid, he shoved him hard in the shoulder. Gasps spread through the crowd as several neighbors stepped back. Richard Harrison folded his arms with a satisfied smile, convinced his son was teaching the quiet single father a lesson. Ethan barely moved from the shove. He simply looked at Tyler and said, "I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to spend time with my daughter. Walk away and this ends now." Instead of listening, Tyler took a fighting stance, showing off the techniques that had earned him his black belt. "One punch," he shouted confidently, "and everyone will see what a real fighter looks like." Several guests began recording with their phones, expecting an embarrassing defeat for the construction worker. Tyler lunged forward with a powerful punch aimed directly at Ethan's face. In one smooth movement, Ethan stepped slightly to the side, redirected Tyler's arm with effortless precision, and allowed the young man to stumble past him without throwing a single punch. Before Tyler could regain his balance, Ethan calmly controlled his wrist and gently guided him to one knee using a simple defensive hold. The entire exchange lasted less than 3 seconds. Tyler struggled, but every attempt to break free only tightened the hold without. Ethan using unnecessary force. The backyard fell completely silent. Richard's confident smile disappeared.
"How?"
he whispered. Ethan released Tyler immediately and stepped back, giving him room to stand. "I told you," Ethan said quietly. "I don't want to fight." Tyler stared at him in disbelief. No one had ever neutralized him so easily. Just then, an older man who had been quietly watching from across the yard slowly approached. He wore a Navy veteran's cap and looked at Ethan with wide eyes before smiling with recognition. "I knew I recognized you," he said. "You're Chief Petty Officer Ethan Carter, the Navy SEAL who received the Silver Star." The crowd turned toward Ethan in stunned silence. For the first time, Tyler realized the humble, single dad standing before him wasn't an ordinary construction worker at all, and the biggest surprise was still waiting to be revealed. Tyler slowly stood up, rubbing his wrist in disbelief. His confidence had vanished, replaced by confusion and embarrassment. The crowd that had expected to see the humble single father, humiliated now, whispered among themselves, trying to understand how a construction worker had effortlessly outmaneuvered a young black belt without throwing a single punch. The elderly Navy veteran stepped forward, smiling proudly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "you've been calling this man a construction worker, but before that, he served our country as one of the finest Navy SEALs I've ever known. I served alongside men like him. They aren't trained to win tournaments. They're trained to survive battles and bring people home alive." A wave of silence swept across the backyard. Richard Harrison's face turned pale as he realized his son had challenged someone whose real-life experience far exceeded years of competitive martial arts. Tyler looked at Ethan with new eyes. Is that true?" he asked quietly. Ethan nodded once. "It was a long time ago." Tyler frowned. "Then why didn't you say anything?" Ethan glanced toward Emma, who was still standing beside him. "Because that chapter of my life ended when my wife passed away. My daughter needed a father more than the Navy needed another operator. Since then, I've never cared whether people knew who I used to be." Those words left many neighbors emotional. Several lowered their phones, realizing this wasn't just another neighborhood argument. It was a lesson in humility. Just then, Emma stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her father. "He's always my hero," she said proudly. Tyler looked down at the ground, ashamed of his behavior. After a long pause, he walked toward Ethan and extended his hand. "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "I judged you because of your clothes and your job. I thought a black belt made me stronger than everyone else." Ethan shook his hand firmly and smiled. "A black belt is something to be proud of," he replied. "But real strength isn't about proving you're tougher than someone else. It's about having the discipline to walk away when you can." Richard Harrison also stepped forward, his pride replaced with regret. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I owe both you and your daughter an apology." Ethan accepted it with a simple nod. As the barbecue resumed, the atmosphere had completely changed. Neighbors who had barely spoken to Ethan before now thanked him for his military service and admired the humility with which he had lived. Tyler spent the rest of the afternoon helping clean up the event alongside Ethan, learning more in a few hours about respect and character than he ever had inside a martial arts gym. Before leaving, the Navy veteran looked at the crowd and said, "Today you all witnessed something important. Titles, trophies, and wealth may impress people, but humility, courage, and self-control earn lasting respect." The backyard erupted in applause, not for a fight won, but for a lesson that no one there would ever forget. Ethan took Emma's hand, smiled at his daughter, and quietly walked home, proving once again that the strongest people are often the ones who never feel the need to show. A week later, the neighborhood gathered once again, but this time for a very different reason. At the monthly community meeting, Richard Harrison stood before everyone with a humbled expression. The man who had once measured people by their wealth now looked directly at Ethan and said, "I've spent years teaching my son how to succeed in business, but I forgot to teach him the value of humility. Mr. Carter, thank you for teaching him a lesson that money never could." The room filled with applause as Tyler stepped forward carrying a small wooden plaque engraved with the words, "True strength is quiet." He handed it to Ethan and smiled. "I used to believe strength meant defeating people. Now I know it means protecting them." Ethan accepted the gift with a grateful nod. Just when the meeting seemed over, several black government SUVs quietly pulled into the neighborhood. Everyone watched in surprise as two senior naval officers in dress uniforms stepped out and walked directly toward Ethan. The crowd fell silent. One of the officers saluted him before presenting a small velvet case. "Chief Petty Officer Ethan Carter," he announced proudly. Your actions during Operation Iron Shield were recently declassified. On behalf of the United States Navy, we're honored to present the distinguished service medal that could not be awarded. Publicly until now, gasps spread through the audience. Even Emma looked at her father in amazement, realizing there were parts of his past he had never spoken about. The officer continued, "This man risked his own life to rescue an entire team during one of the most dangerous missions in our unit's history. Yet after leaving the service, he never sought recognition. He chose instead to become the best father he could be." Every person in the neighborhood rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Tyler's eyes filled with emotion as he realized he had challenged a man whose greatest victories had never been fought for applause. After the ceremony ended, Emma slipped her hand into her father's and whispered, "Dad, are you really a hero?" Ethan smiled warmly, knelt beside her, and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "No, sweetheart," he replied softly. "Heroes are people who do the right thing even when no one is watching. I just tried to do my job, and now my most important job is being your dad." As they walked home together beneath the golden evening sky, the neighbors watched with newfound respect. Ethan had never needed to prove his strength through anger, wealth, or recognition. His greatest victory wasn't defeating a black belt fighter. It was showing an entire community that humility, courage, and love for family are the strongest qualities a person can possess.